Very happy to be, for the first time in my life, in Bristol today. And so yeah, as Sophia said, my very small practice, PiM.studio, based in London, almost 4 years young or old practice, which I established with my wife and partner, and we are 4 of us. And later on, I'll talk about some of the projects we do at PiM.studio. But I think for starting and for a good part of the presentation today, I'd like to talk about V&A Dundee, which is a project that some of you may probably know has been sort of widely published. And it's important for me because it took a long part of my architecture career. It started in 2010 when I was working in Tokyo with Ken Kuma, and we won the design competition for the museum. And it took about 9 years from the design competition winning scheme to opening the doors to the public about a year and a half ago. And it's been a very exciting project, complex but challenging, but very fascinating to be involved on. And one which is sort of moved me from Japan to Scotland to France and to London and today to Bristol. And so I'll start showing this aerial image of Dundee. I don't know how many of you are familiar to Dundee, which is a nice city on the east side of Scotland, about an hour north from Edinburgh. And as you can see here, it's a sort of riverside city. It's located on the estuary of the River Tay, which is quite beautiful, I would say. And on this point where Dundee and where the museum is located, the estuary is about 1 kilometer wide. So it's quite an impressive feature of water, and it's actually very beautiful setting. Dundee, like many other cities, we facing a river in the UK, but all over Europe, really, have a similar sort of past. Dundee had a very strong industrial past, which goes long way back, and it was one of the major producer of jute for ship sailing for the sails. And jute was the main industry in Dundee a few centuries ago. And then during the last sort of century, industries and also the port are obviously locating along the river near the city center and took over most of the riverside of Dundee, like many sort of portual cities in Europe, as I said. But then in the last sort of 30-ish year, industries have gone, and riversides all over Europe have remained underutilized and disconnected from the cities and became a big barrier between city center and the river. In fact, you can see there in this image that the city center is pretty close to the riverside, just a couple of blocks. But the first time I went there about 10 years ago now, it was completely disconnected. It was very hard and very uninviting to go from city center and to walk down to the riverfront, which, by the way, is very beautiful. So Dundee City Council designed this master plan, which you see partly realized, at least in its infrastructure and all the road infrastructure and the shape of the new plots is there now, is realized, and has been realized in the past 10 years, and is now under development. Some of the plots are in construction. Some buildings are being completed, and the main point of Dundee doing this, it was to bring the city and people back to the riverfront, because the connection with the riverfront has always been very important. It was lost in the past few decades, so Dundee wanted to recreate somehow this connection. And through a series of events and things, they had the chance to bring V&A, so a major museum, as part of the master plan, with the hope that a major cultural building will help sort of leading the other developments on one hand, but also will help drawing people and visitors toward the riverside and toward the Tay side. And so they established this competition, which we won in 2010. And the main request was, in fact, to obviously create an important sort of international museum and a beautiful building. But the main point was to create this connection with nature. And that's what we wanted to do most with our competition design. For us, creating a building which will be naturally sitting on the water and on the riverside, it was very important, and this is what we really tried to do with our design, and I guess that's why that was appreciated from the jury, from the competition. And the main sort of, if you like, source of inspiration, or the main reference that we started looking at during the competition design was the Scottish landscape. Scottish landscape is amazing, it's beautiful, it's fascinating, it's very strong, it's very powerful. And what we started looking at one day were photographs of some of the Scottish cliffs. This in particular is on the very far northeast of Scotland. And for us, it was a sort of revelation moment, if you like, because it was very beautiful as a landscape, as a natural landscape in general. But most importantly, that showed us something that is the relation between water and land in nature. And the cliff, as many, that is generated through time, through centuries, by the dialogue between water and land. And this type of dialogue, this type of idea is what we wanted to recreate with the building. So we saw these sort of striations, these layers which are created, through the time between water and the land. And this is what we wanted to recreate in a contemporary shape, in a contemporary architecture with our building, and to make this sort of natural dialogue between the building sitting on the water. And here you'll see some images of this relation between the water and the building. The one important thing, which is also, I think, a nice part, and you start seeing now in the building, the result of that is that because we are in the estuary and the Tay there is so wide, the tide, it varies quite a lot through the year, but also on a sort of weekly basis, the tide can go up or down about 8-9 meters. So it's quite considerable. And it goes from very close to that small black triangle, which is a pretty big window in reality. And at very low tide, you can see part of the riverbed. So this change is quite impressive. And that's also what was important, because that it also reflects to changes to the building. And in fact, now, since that part of the building has been there for like 3-4 years since during construction and after the opening, and you already start seeing some of the sort of green building up on that part of the base of the building, which for us it was very important, because the building start aging and taking something from the water, from the river, from the nature, and the water then is affecting in its own way the parts of the building. And this again is another image of the relation of the building with water, but not with the natural water of the building, with some of the very sort of reflective shallow pond that we created all around the building. And you can see in this plan, this is the ground floor plan, you'll see that the bottom side is obviously the river. And what we did is we created this quite large shallow ponds all around the building in a way that the building is surrounded by water. The river on one side and the artificial ponds on the rest of the perimeter of the plan. And it only touches, the ground only touches the building at the entrances. So at the main public entrance, you see there closer to me, and then the service staff entrance and the delivery service access. And that was very important for us. And the reason why we created these very shallow ponds is that we wanted as much as possible to have a very close, intimate relation between visitors and the water in a way. So we've created this like 15 centimeters shallow pond in a way that we could get away without any balustrading. And so then there is no barrier, and the relation with water is very sort of close, and there is a lot of proximity between visitors and the water. And then I have here, that's one of the sort of very early design concept or diagrams that we did during the competition to explain the idea of generating the shape and the form of the building. And basically what we did is we have this green line, which is an alignment through one of the main axes connecting the city center to the riverside is Union Street. So it's the road you walk on, the street you walk on when you're going from the city center to the river. And the other one, that red dotted line, is the axis on which the Discovery ship sits. The Discovery is been there for many years and is not going to go away. It's not moving. It's permanently docked there. And Discovery is the original ship that Captain Scott used in his expedition to Antarctica. And the Discovery was built in Dundee. And it's quite an important attraction. It's quite beautiful. And it was quite important for us to have the museum sitting next to it, not just for the sort of symbolic meaning for the city, but also because obviously the Discovery is important in its relation with the water and the way the Discovery was the first ever ship built on purpose for a scientific expedition. So it was quite interesting as well. So basically we took these two sort of linear axes, these two directions, and then by sort of overlapping and twisting them, we somehow generated the shape of the building. And in these are study models that haven't been shown much around. And some of the initial studies that we did for the building, just by sort of thinking of what the concept and what the shape in relation to the water will be, and to the flow and passage of people, and without necessarily having the sort of shape of the museum in mind yet. It was more sort of space concept and ideas how we wanted to create this relation between people, visitors, and the building. And then we started putting things in the functions and the program of the museum, and then that was starts, one way or another shaping the building, which then, at the beginning it had some bit clumsy form, and then it, through several iterations and quite several models made in Tokyo, it went on to generate the final shape of the building. And the one aspect which is shown in this image, it was always very important. You've seen it, for example, in this very initial model, is this void in the center of the building. And for us, that was very important, because then the void, in a way, becomes the generator of the entire architecture. And it's so critical here, because the void is sort of, when you're walking down from the Union Street, from the city center, toward the riverside and toward the museum, the void, this central void, it frames the river, it frames the water, and it frames the coast on the other side of the estuary. And in a way, it creates this beautiful image of the river, and it also helps inviting people to walk through and to go to the riverside and to the promenade along the river. And that's part of a promenade which crosses the building here in this void in the center of the building, and it goes all around the building, and which was also that was sort of our interpretation of the competition brief, asking for people and visitors to be able to walk around the building and on the riverside. So we decided to just place the building on top of the promenade and allowing people to go around. The sort of counterside problem that we generated to ourselves is that by allowing people to walk around the building in a very, very public area, then we could not afford the luxury of having a back facade. And so we had then to, so that's why we made this, which is the sort of staff entrance to the office, and also the sort of delivery bay, which is slightly on the other side. They had to have the same importance and the same value as the main entrance, because we felt that we couldn't arrive at the point of having part of the public space that then it will feel like, we are on the back side of the building. That's the back of house. So everything had to be important, because the public space for us in this project was very, very critical, probably as much as the interior space, because the idea is to draw people and to invite people to enjoy the riverside, and that should be done through a powerful and beautiful public space. And these are a few more images of this promenade that sort of goes all around the building and create this journey through the riverside and around the building until then you get to the main public entrance. And then while entering inside the building, the sort of atmosphere, the mood, it changes somehow through the materiality of the facade of this large main hall. And what happens, and we have used a lot of timber. These are oak panels. And here you see a view back toward the city center from the main entrance. And here is the main hall, which is a very large space where there is the cafe and the shop and the info desk. And I think for us, this was a very important space, because in this idea that we wanted to express with the project and with the museum of a strong public space for Dundee, both outside and inside, the main hall, it became the sort of focal point of the project. And for us, the idea was to create a sort of indoor piazza where people could go for a coffee, or just for a chat, or just to sit down. And in fact, you will see in some of the images, there is this sort of continuous timber bench, which goes from the very entrance of the building, and it surrounds the entire main hall where people can sit. And maybe because of my background, but I always had in mind these beautiful squares in Italy. Well, there is a cafe, there is maybe a market or shops, and people just go, sit down on a bench, meet friends, have a chat, relax, and enjoy the life. So I think the concept of what we wanted to create with the main hall, it was this, a real public space indoor, so that during the Scottish winter, you will still also be warm and be able to actually enjoy your coffee. But that was the idea that we had in mind to create that. And that's also why we've decided to use those materials. To be perfectly honest, during the competition design, the interior of the main hall was supposed to have the same material as the external facade. And then through time and to rethinking and redefining the design, which I think is in part because this always happens. And often I've been asked from the press and through other talks, is the final building reflecting the original competition scheme? And my answer is always, in a way, yes, but in reality, it's better. Because during competition, you have 3 months to come out with a genius idea. But then you have 3 years to refine that idea and to make it better and to improve the space and to think what the spaces will look like, to think about material, to test more solutions, to test different details, and to ultimately make it better. So then at some point we thought that for having this sort of welcoming idea of public space, if we had this timber panel facade, then that will be warmer as a feeling, and it will make it more welcoming and more interesting and easier to enjoy for people. So we redesigned the internal facade to this sort of randomly inclined timber panels, which also help breaking down the scale of the wall, because this wall is about 14 meters high. So we also thought that it was important to break it down in smaller elements so that it will not feel too sort of intimidating and too big. And that's the final sort of look of it, with the cafe and the shop and everything else, just before the opening from the upper floor. And again, that is a view of that window I was mentioning earlier. And I think also it was important because there are few sort of small, tiny windows through the main hall. And then there is this larger, sort of bigger moment where you have this view of the river and this closer relation with water. And what we did is that we didn't want to have people going inside the building and then having this fantastic view of the river really visible at all times. And we wanted to create small moments at different heights and different locations where you'll be able to see the river, but not having everything completely transparent, both for a sort of experience, a spatial experience point of view, but also for obvious reason because of protecting from the weather, wind, and so on. And in a way, that was also a sort of interpretation of traditional Scottish architecture, which, besides very different in sort of shape and form, but traditional architecture is very much a heavy, strong stone architecture, what you see in Scotland, and then there are small windows inside and a lot of natural material, timber and natural stone. So we, in the contemporary architecture interpretation, that was our sort of way to reinvent and to pay homage to traditional Scottish architecture, both in Dundee and elsewhere. And then again, a view from the main staircase, which leads from the main hall to the upper floor. And what was also important for us in having this very large open space, it was also a way to let people orientate and understand what the space is like and how the building works. We didn't want to design a complicated building and then visitors will have to arrive, start asking questions, direction, and start looking at the map and where am I, where's the lift, and where. So we wanted people to just relax and be able to arrive inside and just look around and be able to understand quite naturally where to go. And that's why it's inside when you enter, it really is very, very simple. And you have this very large public space and then a big staircase, and which invites you to go upstairs in this sort of journey through the building and to enjoy the rest of it. And here I have put for you a drawing of these internal timber panels that we realized to put this idea in practice of these sort of randomly orientated timber panels, which they look all different and they look all at different angles. And it was very fascinating at the first render, but we had to figure out a way to make it buildable and not to drive builders crazy, and also to make it reasonably efficient and affordable within what they could do. So we've generated this parametric 3D model where we could control on one side the final effect so that we could still keep this randomness and endless variation, but then we could also give it parameters and say, we only want 3 widths of panels, and with 3 widths of panel and 4 lengths, then we managed to place them all randomly, but there will be an efficiency of some sort for production and also for installation. So then the manufacturer, they produced all the panels, which were in, I think, beside maybe the corner panels, there were 7 or 8 different sizes altogether, and they were all numbered so that each one will go in its own place with its own label. And we had a sort of flexible bracket so that they could all be orientated in the same way. So we've from the 3D model, we managed to get a simple Excel chart with each label, and each panel had its own angle at which it had to be installed. And I'm afraid I had no chance to check if each panel was installed exactly at the same angle. But the result was what we wanted to have, which was the sort of important bit. So I think it worked quite nicely with the joiners that went on installing the panels. And that diagram, it shows the relation between the big public space, the main hall at the ground floor, and this other sort of foyer space in the upper floor, which is very important, as I say, for people to help people to navigate through the building and to create this natural sort of journey through the building and along the staircase that you see here. And one of the ways through which we managed to achieve this sort of organic relation between the two open spaces is by creating this inclined oblique wall, which you see there in front of the image. And that it obviously reflects from the external shape of the building, but what it does inside, that it avoids in most of the building having vertical walls, because we felt vertical walls are often more intimidating to users, while an inclined wall, it will help both your site and the space to flow from the ground floor to the upper floor, and will invite more naturally people to walk and to experience the building all around. And in fact, in this image, you see how this sort of draw your attention to the upper floor, where there is this wall with actually nice art installation. And on the other side, you have the sort of opposite view, this time with people, and which shows that this dynamic relation between the two spaces, from the upper floor to the lower main hall. And the same thing, or a similar thing, happens on the outside, where these sort of inclined, twisting walls, they help creating those external spaces, which are also in a way protected from the weather. So you are you don't get wet when it rains. And so it becomes a sort of in-between space where you feel slightly more welcomed and drawn toward the entrance of the building, in a way like it happens when you have a sort of porch in some building, where you are semi-external space, but you still sort of more invitingly led to the building. And same again happens in this void space, where the two inclined walls help, offer protection to people from the rain and from the elements, but also invite people to walk through this promenade and to go toward the riverside. And here there are some more images of the museum. This is again this upper floor foyer open space. This is what we call the Michelin Design Gallery, and this is exhibition space in addition to the more sort of formal official galleries, and is one of those spaces where the museum is able to have a sort of quicker exhibition, which they change, I think, like 2 or 3 times a year, but to have sort of more informal type of exhibition and to be able to sort of react quickly to what happens in the world, and to install these very simple installations. I think this is important for the museum to have these type of spaces, which we try to create in different areas around the building, like also in the main hall, which is suitable for these kind of small exhibitions. Because for preparing and installing those type of large exhibitions, like they have now in V&A, like they have in larger the Tate or V&A in London, it takes quite a long time. The preparation of one exhibition, from concept, design, and so on, it starts maybe 2 years before the exhibition goes on show. So then when a museum wants to have something and react quickly to what happens, in the world and in society. It needs to have this, smaller informal spaces where things can happen quickly. And we try to create these opportunities in different areas of the building. And actually, in this space with PiM.studio, my practice, we're now designing an exhibition which will start in May. And it's a very interesting space to work on. And that is obviously the restaurant, which has quite a nice view. And you see here how beautiful actually is the River Tay, the estuary is, and that on the background is the rail bridge, which is also very, very interesting, very beautiful. And that's finally, it's a floor plan of this upper floor. So there on the bottom left-hand side, you see the restaurant, which is what I've shown in the last picture. And on the right side of the building, you'll see the more formal exhibition gallery spaces. Here on the lower side, where there's the white box, which is the main goods lift, is the smaller gallery, about 500 square meters, and that is the Scottish Design Gallery, where there is a semi-permanent exhibition of the history of design through Scottish eyes, if you like. So the Scottish designers, both in textile and in design, in furniture design, and in many other fields, and in technology and game design, which is a big industry actually in Dundee, have traveled through history all over the world and have had a strong influence in a lot of design fields. And this exhibition tries to sort of put all this history together and to show what Scottish designers through time have done and how they have contributed to the history of design. And this is instead an image of the main temporary gallery, where the sort of large blockbuster shows are exhibited. And in fact, you'll probably never see in this empty, because it's always obviously full of partitions and with all the large exhibition going on. And that's an image of the same gallery. But what we wanted here is to, first of all, we wanted to avoid creating the sort of white exhibition box, and with just full of technology, ready for any video and anything, and just give it there anonymous, and that could be anywhere in the world. So obviously it's full of technology, because that's absolutely necessary. But we wanted to also create a special space to which curators and exhibition designers could react, perhaps in a creative way, and not just have this empty box in which anything can happen and there is nothing to react to. And also we wanted to introduce some natural lighting, and that's why you'll see there are some of these small slot windows that are also all around the rest of the facade. And they also appear in some places in the gallery, and there are a few large skylights that bring natural light from the roof. And that is, I think, interesting. It's not always possible, for obvious reasons. There are some objects in exhibition that are very delicate and cannot have natural light. So these windows can all be blacked out. But in some exhibitions, the curators and designers can use natural light as part of the exhibition, and that would create a different experience, which would be unique to Dundee, as to say an exhibition coming from, I don't know, the Guggenheim or the V&A in London. And that will make it a sort of special experience for the exhibition in Dundee. And here, I want you to show this image, and this because it was quite important for us. Midway through the design of the building, the V&A Dundee, together with Charles Rennie Mackintosh, sort of institutions from Glasgow, they managed to have this deal, if I can call it this way, and to have this fantastic tea room designed by Mackintosh in the early 20th century in Glasgow. And this is the Oak Room, it's called. And it was in a building, obviously, in Glasgow. And the building was demolished during the 70s. And students from the Glasgow School of Art managed to go into the building before the building was demolished and to save all the interior panels and lighting and the original pieces from the building, which then, unfortunately, or fortunately, it sat as a sort of bunch of timber planks in a storage since the 70s until like 4 years ago. V&A Dundee managed to have all of that and to, in agreement with the School of Art and with other Macintosh institutions, and to have a complete restoration of the Oak Room and to rebuild the original Oak Room inside one of the galleries inside the museum. And for us, obviously, it was very nice because maybe also for Kego Kuma, who's, as anyone, a big fan of Charles Rennie Mackintosh. And well, before and even before we started the design, we went to Glasgow to visit the School of Art and to see some of other Mackintosh projects. We know Mackintosh obviously was quite influenced by Japanese design and Japanese architecture in his design. So it was then very interesting for us to have this connection and to have one original Mackintosh work inside the museum, which also it was not seen for the last sort of 40 or 50 years. And it's very, very beautiful indeed. And again, as I said, I think the one very, very important point for the design of the building is seeing people using the building in quite freely and flexible ways. For us, when we think of a building and a flexible architecture is not just an architecture where you can sort of divide the room into rooms, or where you have more sort of technological tools in the ceiling so that you can, put a projector anywhere in the room. A flexible architecture is, I think, one where people and user can feel sort of free to use it in different ways. And possibly and hopefully in ways that us as designers, as an architect, we hadn't envisaged before and we had not expected. And when users are able to use your space and your architecture in their own way without being programmed and without being expected, I think that's when architecture is successful and it becomes interesting. And for us here, it was very important to have a successful public space. And I have to say, every time I've been back to Dundee since the opening of both the public space and the interior of the building, it's been always nice to see that it was used by many people. And I think importantly, it was used by many people, and not all of them were going inside the museum. It was just used as part of the city public space. And I think that's what sort of makes me most happy, because then I see that people will just feel this public space of the museum as part of the public space of the city and of Dundee. And it gets used in different ways, and especially children, which are always best finding the most interesting uses for building. And that's also what interesting me to see people being able to use the interior of the building, the main hall, and all the sort of the free space around the interior of the building as a real public space. And I think that was very important for us. And to me, that's the successful part of the building, not just, obviously awards are nice to have, but seeing people, how they use the building, is the most sort of rewarding thing for us. And I think now, it's a bit late, but I'll go through some of the images of the construction site, which may be interesting for you, I think. And go through this one, which it shows the way the building was built on the riverside, especially on the part which is sitting right on the riverbed. So what we did is that we built a cofferdam, essentially, which goes all around. It was offset maybe about, 15 meters from the edge of the building. And that allowed contractors to obviously access there with trucks and to build a crane on that side and to be able to access and to build the riverside facade and the walls and so on. And then that was removed when the facade obviously was completed, and that was about a year before the building opened. And what you see here in some of these images, which was also a very challenging and very interesting process of the construction, is all these walls, which have this sort of double curvature and inclined geometry, quite complex. They were all cast in situ. They were all concrete wall cast in situ, and so all the formworks, they had to be custom made based on each different location of the building. And you can see here some of this sort of complicated formwork all around the building. And essentially, the skin of the building, which is this 30 centimeter thick or thin wall, is the entire structure of this sort of column-free entire building, which then gets tied into the shaft, the sort of lift shaft through the steel beams on the roof. For this reason, and as you can see here, we could not remove any of the formwork until the roof was completed. So we had to wait. So the formwork remained in place for about a year and a half until we put all the beam roofs, and then magically we could unwrap everything in like 1 week. And that was around my birthday, so it was quite interesting. And then you see here an image of when we started removing the scaffolding and the formwork all around the building. And that was quite an interesting process. Here, this shows an Arup drawing, which shows the different elements of the wall. And there is obviously the pink is the skin is that concrete wall around the building, and all the sort of intricate grid of steel beams that hold together all of that, and the ground floor slab and foundation. This is some of the mock-up we asked the contractor to do, just so that we could make sure that they will understand and they could test the construction methodology for this curved wall, and obviously to make it more challenging for them. For this mock-up, we picked up the most extreme curvature in the building, so that we will make sure that if they can do that, they can do everything else. And they managed to do it, and that's the final, the real section of that mock-up when they did it for the building. And you'll see that the wall in maybe 10 meters, it changes completely its inclination from one side to the other side, and some other images of the building before the facade panels went on. And so this one, again, this is the sister model of the one from the planks, and that's the same parametric model with the same sort of strategy we use or technology we use for building for designing the external facade. And here you see a section of that. The external facade is made out of precast concrete with, as you see, a very rough exposed aggregate. And these are some of the tests we did with the manufacturer to select and to find the material that we like. And the reason why we picked a very sort of rough aggregate, exposed aggregate, is that we wanted to recreate somehow this idea of roughness as you have in a natural surface, like in the cliff image that I showed earlier. And also because we wanted something that will get dirty through time. We didn't want a very clean facade, which will then have to be maintained clean throughout the years. We wanted something that it will age naturally through time, that perhaps on the southeast side, where the prevalent winds are, will change color in 5 years, and the sort of northeast side will not, and then there will be these variations. And that's what happens naturally in nature, in the cliffs and everywhere else. So we say, why this cannot happen in a building? And that's why we try to have all these sort of variations in the facade of the building. And I think I'm getting a bit late, but I'll show some images and I'll talk through that. One reason why, also we choose this material for the facade is so to allow and to make this also variation in section. And by the way, that has this, we use the same strategy of trying to create similar modules for all the panels outside. So they all have the same section, despite the fact that then the 2,500 something panels, they're all different, but they were all made with the same mold on factory. Or well, there are probably 3 or 4 the same, but they all have the same shape. And the reason why we used that, initially we were very sort of first week of the competition design, we wanted to use natural stone. Natural stone, we thought it's very important in Scotland because in Scotland, each city, well, there is obviously extensive use of natural stone, and because each city historically used natural stone locally available, that generates the image of the city. If you've ever been to Aberdeen, that's very gray looking because the granite from Aberdeen around quarries is what it is. Or if you go to Edinburgh or even to Dundee or Glasgow, they all have their same their character, which is very specific to the city, and it comes from the stone that you have, that you can find around. We immediately, during the competition, found out that Dundee's quarry, they no longer work. There is only one which only produces a very little amount of stone, which is not available. It's not sort of available in these quantities. It's not suitable really for construction. It's used for very sort of small interior sort of objects. So we decided that we wanted to create a new material for the building. And that's why we've went through the several iterations of testing different mixes and different type of aggregates to find this. And we ultimately wanted something that is new, it's artificial, it doesn't pretend to be sort of a fake stone, but it fits and it sort of blends well with the rest of the buildings in the city. And that's how we came to this material, which then it sort of changes through shadow, sort of plays with shadows, and it changes through day and night, and it reacts to light in different ways, both on the sort of more external facade and also on this sort of void tunnel side of it. And these are just few final images. And you see here how the water starts having its own, that's one of the most recent images, it starts having its own effect on the basement of the plinth that we built on the riverside. And that's obviously an image of this beautiful setting on the river Tay. And this final image for this project is probably my favorite photograph of the building, because it really shows how the building, despite obviously having its very peculiar, sort of special, contemporary form and look, somehow it blends naturally and well with both with the river, but also with the rest of the city center in the background. And there will be a very nice video here. And just going then quickly through some of projects that we're doing with my practice. For us, starting practice half the way through construction of the V&A was very interesting, because obviously starting a new practice, starting with the V&A Dundee, it was quite exciting, but it also took 100% of our time for 2 years, so we didn't have time to do anything else. Fortunately, during the design of that and during the construction stages of the V&A, the client asked us to design some of the small items inside the building, like the info desk you see here at the entrance, or like some of the sort of lounge spaces. That was, mostly specifying furniture and designing some of the spaces, but it was a nice, interesting thing for us, and it was a sort of nice transition from working on the project to start working on our small designs. And this is one of the sort of learning center areas and the donation box. And there are some other projects which I wanted to go very quickly through before we maybe go through some questions. That's with our practice, we're very small. We're just 4 of us, as I said. But since both me and Mark, the director, have worked for like 15 years in large practice, we always worked both in very big projects, but also in very, very small projects, like temporary installations, small pavilions, and so on. So with a practice of 4, we would like to somehow continue recreating the same thing and work at all different scales and all different type of program. We are always happy to undertake any type of different project when there is something interesting. It is a master plan we did in Milan 3 years ago. It's probably the first project we did with a practice. We were invited to competition. We designed this master plan, and to the surprise of our client, we won the competition. And so we submitted this drawing where you see all the buildings are very different, one from each other, with different shapes, different roof, different facade, different everything. But there is a lot of sort of green areas. All the public space or the common and shared spaces in the master plan, they are very green and very sort of rich as public space. And that's what we thought it could hold together the entire master plan. And then we went to present this to the client at the presentation day a couple of weeks after submission, and they told us that they would have never chose our project, but then after we explained the idea, they decided that it was worthwhile going with us. And our idea was that as architects, when we design, especially very large master plans like this, we tend to make very beautiful renderings with all the building looking the same, all nice facade, with our special design. But then I don't think I've ever seen a master plan of this size being realized by the same architect. And even if then all the buildings look the same, they would be pretty boring, I would say. And so we've designed buildings as if they were designed like it happens in reality by 10 different architects, and we design all different buildings. And so that our idea is that even though those buildings will be designed by very different architects, we still have something that holds the entire sort of master plan together, which is an idea of green in public space and very sort of large green, and with this sort of small small sort of water party is now buried, and we're hoping to get it back. And it was a traditional sort of irrigation system as part of the sort of countryside immediately outside Milan. And that is at the opposite end of the scale of projects we work with. Is a big marble tile. We work with an Italian marble company to create a new texture for their catalog. And basically what we did for them is to start from, this is a sort of 3D CNC'd marble slab, about 3 meters by 1, something like that. So what we did is that we started from a grid, and then as you see this sort of zigzag line in the center image, we've recorded the sound that marble blocks make when they're cut in the quarry. And this sound wave is sort of distorted the grid, and that creates the effect of the final slab, which you then see three-dimensionally here. So the idea was to sort of put into the marble the sound that comes from when this is cut. This is similar thing we did for the same company, but probably not worth going through. And that finally is the probably smallest project we did, which is a dog house. And for this dog house, which is flexible and it can be turned around depending on the size of the dog, for the facade design of the dog house, we used a similar design strategy than the previous design. So we recorded different bark sound from different dogs, and then that distorted the circle pattern, so that the facade house of the dog house, it can be customized based on the barking of its very inhabitant. And then you see the sort of unfolding drawings here. That's maybe I go skip through that. That's some pavilion design we did. There was another pavilion we did for an exhibition, which then unfortunately wasn't realized, and we called it the Embassy for Climate Refugee, and that shows this sort of neon light thing. They represent some complex sort of functions of climate change, about raising temperature, raising water level, and so on. And so we thought of sort of making this message or sending this message simply by realizing physically those diagrams in the exhibition. This is a square design in Italy where we've proposed introducing trees. Very simply in that. I think I'll skip through that and go to some of the latest project. That is a small concert hall we designed in north of Italy near the Alps, but that's the roof plan. And our idea is that we wanted the music hall through the roof plan to disappear. And that's a sort of view of it. And then you see that this is a very beautiful landscape, and it's very nice. So we didn't want to damage the view and the landscape, so we thought if we make something that is barely visible and you can only see when you are entering through or when you are inside, but still enjoying the nature behind in the backdrop while you are enjoying a nice piece of music, that will probably make it quite interesting. And then, at night it probably appear more. That's, and I'll probably close with that, is a project we have now on site and should be ready by this summer. It's called Patio House, and it's in Switzerland. And it's a single family house, and it's entirely designed around this central open patio. And as you see here from the section, our idea was that by having this central, small, natural space, and then that's surrounded by the rest of their beautiful garden, then from each room of the house, you will always be able to see nature on two sides. On one side, you have this large window, and you'll see the small, sort of intimate, natural space of the patio, and on the other side, you'll be able to see the sort of larger garden with the natural pond and so on. The deers are not in their garden for now. I don't know if they will ever be. That's an image of the patio, and that's just the sort of floor plan. So you see this close relation with nature from both sides. And I think, sorry, I will skip that, and I will go through these, if you allow me. It's a bit late. And this is an exhibition design we did for the London Design Festival last, you should say 2019, but never mind. And it was an exhibition design for a design gallery. This design gallery, they had the exhibition the previous year for the London Design Festival, and they had all these pine, sort of wooden sticks, dowels, that are hanging from the ceiling in a beautiful installation, not designed by us, but nevertheless beautiful. And then this year, they've asked both us as architects to design their entire exhibition and some other designer to design some objects for the exhibition, but they've asked us to use only the material that they had from the previous exhibition that was in storage. So we tried to reuse those those dowels and to reinvent something new with that. And then so we created these sort of zigzag walls, which then it was illuminated from the back. And we've tried to recreate something new and elegant in the space. And you'll see here this bench and this sort of fabric screen, which was the work of the other, which was the exhibits that we worked with. Basically, it was also a beautiful space, and basically you'll see this metal smaller profile, which is this, it was what keeps together the dowels. That was the only thing that we actually designed and that we produced as a new material by laser cutting a few of these pieces, and everything else it was reusing the material from the previous exhibition. That's why the exhibition was called Second Life. I think I'll probably skip through that. It was nice to see. The last one, it is an installation we did at the Royal Academy very recently, where we essentially recreated a micro forest inside one of the Royal Academy gallery, which stayed on for one night. That's my son, by the way. And which was also quite successful, quite interesting. And the one reason why I shown that is that sometimes we use this very small scale project to sort of test and experiment thing that we want to then recreate in a bigger scale. So this idea of the small sort of forest inside the Royal Academy, that's something that then we tested in a bigger scale project to try to create a large public space full of trees where people could enjoy. So sorry for being late, and thank you very much.